The 2022 NFL Draft is in the books, and now perhaps the most fun, or depending if you're a team that had a bad draft, the most annoying part of the aftermath of the NFL Draft, and that is immediate grades and reactions. And before we dive in, if there are picks we discuss that aren't great, or to me that didn't make a lot of sense, and there's going to be some of them, don't get me wrong, here's what I'll say. The 2012 NFL Draft for the Browns was the turnaround of the franchise, as Brandon Weeden and Trent Richardson were going to be the quarterback-running back duo to lead them to the promised land, and the Seahawks draft was horrific as they drafted a quarterback who didn't fit their system and was a bad pick in Russell Wilson, and they drafted a small school linebacker in Bobby Wagner who had no business in being drafted as high as he was. I'd say it turned out pretty good for the Seahawks despite how bad the initial draft grades were. So again, we are grading teams' picks based on long-term vision and how they got closer to their goal of winning a Super Bowl, and without further ado, let's begin. And with the NFC North draft grades, we are going to be going in order of the division finish from 2021, from the bottom to the top. So we will be starting with the Detroit Lions and Dan Campbell's football team. And out of any of the draft picks the Lions have made since MCDC, Motor City Dan Campbell, and Brad Holmes have been in their roles with the team, Aiden Hutchinson will be the guy to come in and change the defense and the locker room. Lions fans and Michigan fans have been pounding the table for him to be the pick if he was on the clock, and there was a period of time where it didn't look like there was going to be any chance that he would be on the clock, but thankfully for the Lions in the city of Detroit, he was. They also pulled off quite the trade with the division rival Vikings to come up and get receiver Jameson Williams in what was a great trade for Detroit, and that cannot be emphasized enough. The Lions, like everyone else, knew at some point the receiver run would start, and it did at 8 overall, with Drake London being the first one off the board, then followed by Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave at 10 and 11, and for a team that has DJ Chark on just a one-year deal, Amon-Ra St. Brown, whose future looks very promising, and Josh Reynolds, knew they needed to do something at the receiver position and did. And I thought Detroit knocked it out of the park with their first round picks, and even for their second round pick as well in Josh Pascal from Kentucky. Josh is a solid pass rusher, and don't get me wrong, he's not a bad player, but he was selected in the second round for a reason. Having said that, I still think he can be a key contributor and an eventual starter and be the Robin to Aiden Hutchinson's Batman. There was a comp I heard for Pascal that I absolutely loved, and it was Trey Flowers, a player who used to play for the Patriots and the Lions for that matter. And I'm not getting too much into day 3 picks unless one just really stands out amongst the rest, but to get linebacker Malcolm Rodriguez at 188 was low-key one of the bigger steals of the draft. Detroit finished the year on a much better note than they started, and while I don't think Jared Goff is the long-term guy for them, it's not unreasonable to think they can finish the 2022 season around 500, or even better maybe if everything goes right, given the conference they're in, the much weaker NFC, and with how much upside this roster has. 3 long-term starters in Hutch, Jameson Williams, and Pascal, and potentially a 4th and 5th in Kirby Joseph, the 3rd-round pick, a safety, and linebacker Malcolm Rodriguez. Detroit knocked it out of the park, and for a franchise that's used to being the butt of so many jokes and puns and everything else, this was an A-plus draft. Next is the Chicago Bears, who did not have a first-round pick due to the Justin Fields trade from a year ago. Now, the Bears did not have a lot of draft capital entering this past weekend, and that obviously has to be remembered, and new GM Ryan Poles made the most out of what he had, which was not a lot. They ended up with 11 picks, and 5 of them occurred after pick 200, and for Ryan Poles' first draft, he was in a lot of ways set up for failure isn't the right word, but he was set up to not be able to maximize his success, similar to how his quarterback Justin Fields is in a situation now. They had just 3 picks in the top 150, and when the odds are this stacked against you, you have to draft good players. And while I like Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker, I wasn't the biggest fan of these picks because let's call it the way it is with the Chicago Bears. They're not a good football team right now, and they certainly haven't done Justin Fields any favors since he became the quarterback for this franchise. You're supposed to build around a quarterback and help him become the guy, and Gordon and Brisker don't do that. With the 71st pick, I was hoping best receiver available, and they certainly took a receiver all right, and that was Velus Jones Jr. from Tennessee. Now, I don't dislike Velas or think he sucks, I just don't like the selection of him at 71, similar to the Patriots with Tyquan Thornton at 50. It just doesn't make sense, and this is a player who, if he's your guy, by all means, I respect teams going to get their guy, but if he's your guy, you could have gotten more picks by trading back to 80 or 90 or 100 and still drafted him and maybe even get a future 4th or 5th as well. The value didn't add up for that to be the only receiver you walk out of the 2022 NFL Draft with, when your receiving core at the moment is Darnell Mooney, Byron Pringle, Equanimous St. Brown, and Daz Newsome is, well, awful. I liked the Braxton Jones selection at 168 and thought they had great value there, but the other guys they selected after, it's really a dart throw, and if you get a key contributor or two for a couple of years, then it's a hit for any of those guys past 200. I wanted to be clear that Ryan Poles had the odds stacked against him entering the draft, but I wasn't a fan of the game plan, especially when both George Pickens and Sky Moore were on the board. The Bears right now are a bad football team and need to help out Justin Fields, and I don't think they did that with their draft. I liked some of the picks, but overall thought it was underwhelming, and this draft grade gets a C. Next up is the Minnesota Vikings and the first draft of the new regime with GM Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and head coach Kevin O'Connell. And much to the dismay of a lot of the fan base, myself included within that, the draft didn't start out great for the Vikings, as they undersold the number 12 pick and helped the team within the division at that, so it was a double whammy right at the start. And at 32, they selected safety Lewis Cine, who is a good player and a heat-seeking missile of a safety, and one who will play long after Harrison Smith either leaves the team or retires. He is 33 years old. Minnesota entered the draft without a ton of needs, and those needs were headlined by corner and interior offensive line. They had other positions that will need to be filled, like a second receiver due to Adam Thielen being 32 years old, and tight end as well, given Irv Smith is in a contract year, and if he balls out this year, he very well could be gone. But with the players the Vikings selected, I wasn't a huge fan of the overall class, and I like Cine and I like corner Andrew Booth from Clemson, to be clear, but I don't understand the Ed Ingram pick at 59, when to me Dylan Parham was a better prospect and taken 31 spots later, so nearly a full round later, and the pick to me that presents the biggest question mark of the entire Minnesota Vikings 2022 draft, and that's linebacker Brian Asamoah. Hypothetically, if you don't plan to play Brian this upcoming year because you have Eric Hendricks and Jordan Hicks, why wouldn't you take Nakobe Dean, who has taken 17 picks after Asamoah? And to be clear, I obviously don't have the medical information or access the Vikings and their training staff does, so there could be a message from the trainer to the GM that said, look, we're not clearing him, you have to take him off the draft board. But if there wasn't, why not take Nakobe over Asamoah? I also wasn't a huge fan of trading for corner Caleb Evans in the 4th round in what required future draft capital to give up, and when the Vikings made that trade, they were on the clock in 4 picks, and I highly doubt anyone would have taken Evans between 118 and 122. Overall, I'm not the biggest fan of the class for Minnesota, but like with Chicago's class, time will tell. For Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's first draft, we give this a C+. This now leads us to the reigning division champion Green Bay Packers, who after the first round were facing a ton of criticism by not helping out future Hall of Fame quarterback Aaron Rodgers and drafting 2 defensive players. They answered the bell immediately on day 2 by drafting wide receiver Christian Watson, and eventually got another solid receiver in Romeo Doubs as well. I'm not the biggest Quay Walker fan or Devontae Wyatt fan, but the Packers are good at developing defensive players, see Kenny Clark for example. They more than rebounded though, and if there is any quarterback to help maximize Christian Watson, it is Aaron Rodgers. A lot of receivers that have played for the Green Bay Packers have went elsewhere, and they have, well, not been as good as they were in Green Bay, and there's a reason for that. See Greg Jennings, Jordy Nelson, and Randall Cobb for example. The high drop rate to me is not a concern with Christian Watson, as his hand size is in the 91st percentile, and not only that, but Aaron Rodgers is a surgeon with the football and can fit a football through a mailbox. Spend some time on the jugs machine if it's that big of a concern, and number 12 will take care of the rest. Offensive lineman Sean Ryan at 92 was also a good pick for Green Bay, and while they didn't have any home run selections, where you're thinking, damn, they absolutely killed it, They hit a lot of singles and doubles, and that over the course of time will win. I was really happy with how the Green Bay Packers drafted, and their 4th and 5th round picks of Zach Tom and Kingsley Enagbare from South Carolina were also terrific in terms of where they drafted them versus their pre-draft rankings. I like what Green Bay did, and while they didn't knock it out of the park like the Baltimore Ravens, they at least hit the fence and did a good job, and this draft gets an A. And with that being said, that's all I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, now is the time I ask you to please leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because it would truly mean the world. Also, we made a football analysis Discord, so check it out. The link is in the bio. And until next time, as always, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.